if you had faith the size of a mustard seed, you could say to this mulberry tree, uproot yourself and plant yourself in the sea, and it would obey you. In the name of the living God, amen. Please be seated. So every morning, I take one tiny low-dose aspirin. I have done this every morning for nearly 9 years. I will probably do this for the rest of my life. And every morning, I hold this tiny pill in my hand, and I remember that this is a day that I thought I wouldn't have. That this is a day that the odds say I probably shouldn't have had. And I ask myself, how am I going to use the gift of this day? This tiny aspirin, small and insignificant, this is my mustard seed. It is that incredibly small thing which can lead to extraordinary things if I trust enough to let it. So about 9 years ago this month, I was sitting at a dinner when I began to have trouble speaking. I felt like my tongue was sort of dead in my mouth. And when that feeling wouldn't go away, I went to see a doctor and went into his exam room, and he kind of looks at my tongue and pokes and prods and does a couple of basic tests right there in the exam room. And then he says, well, it's either a brain tumor, a growth, or something weird. And so I said, okay, I'll play along. What's something weird? And he said, oh, you know, MS, Lou Gehrig's disease, something like that. I know, that's my reaction. And so I'm saying, okay, is there any chance that it might be something, less serious? And he shook his head and said, no. And then he sent me out to be scheduled for a brain MRI the next morning and sent me home. So let me hit pause here for a second and talk just to the doctors in the congregation. Please never do this. This is not helpful. You do not just say tumor, growth, or something weird, followed by see you later. Because in the space of one sentence, my whole life had changed. In the space of one sentence, everything that I had just assumed that I would live a normal life, watch my kids grow up, all of this was now up for grabs, and frankly, it wasn't looking so good. I am really amazed that I was able to drive home without crashing my car. And all I could think about was there was a friend that we had who was my age with 2 kids who one day he'd woken up with some numbness in his left foot, and 16 months later he was dead of a tumor on his brainstem. And next morning was the MRI. And then there was 30 hours of waiting for results. And I was a wreck. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. All I could think was, my wife is going to be a widow. I will never see my children grow up. My church is going to have to find a new pastor. I am 41 years old, and this is it. And as I lay in bed in the middle of the afternoon, trying to rest, but just racked with anxiety, I realized this is what being at the foot of the cross is. Now that language had always been an image that I had used, but now it was real. This is the place where we come face to face with death, and it was not a fun place to be. It was a terrifying place to be. And then in the middle of that fear, I got this flash, and I remembered. I remembered the promise of the cross is that we are never, never, ever there alone, that Christ is always there with us. And so I thought, well, what do I do? How do I feel Christ's presence in this moment? And so I picked up the phone and I called a dear friend of mine and prayer partner, Don Gandel. Now, Dawn is one of those people who is just a nuclear-powered prayer. Dawn is the kind of prayer that you just know when she gets going, God is thinking, damn, it's Dawn. I had better pay attention because I'm going to be in trouble if I miss something here. And even though we were 1,000 miles apart, I was in St. Louis, she was in Rochester, New York, I remember it like she was right there in the room with me. And after we prayed, I asked her a question. I said, Dawn, if I die, will you be with me at the end, holding my hand and holding Robin's hand? And she said, of course. And I said, and will you make sure that she is okay, that my family is okay, that my congregation is okay? And she said, of course. And then I took a deep breath, and I let it out, and then I felt it. I felt, and I don't know any other way to describe it than it's what St. Paul calls that peace that passes all understanding. Now, it wasn't that I was okay with dying. I was absolutely not. And it wasn't that I wasn't still scared. I absolutely was. And at the same time, deep inside, I felt this peace. Because I knew that even if that which I feared most happened, and I knew it very well might happen, that there was nothing to fear because God, through Dawn, through community, would always be with the people I loved, and that God would always be with me. Now, the rest of this story is still the kind of remarkable that I just can even barely wrap my brain around. As some people I know enjoy saying, my brain scan came back negative. And so, I knew you'd like that. And so they ran a whole bunch of other tests, and what they eventually discovered is that I had a dissection. I had a tear in my left carotid artery, and that a clot had formed, an aneurysm there, and that's where the blood vessel balloons out. Now, normally, the first symptom of this would have been either a major stroke or death, because this was a really big clot. But because the aneurysm happened to impinge on a tiny nerve that created a very specific symptom, the left side of my tongue going numb, that made me go to the doctor and say, what's going on here? They were able to catch it before that happened. Now, even there was a pretty good chance of this stroke happening. They didn't tell me that at the time. I found that out later. The clot was so close to my brain, they didn't want to operate on it, so they put me in the hospital right away and put me on blood thinners. And eventually, when they let me go home, they told me I was going to have to be on these blood thinners for the rest of my life. But it was like 6 months later, when the CT scan, it showed absolutely no trace of the dissection, the clot, the aneurysm, nothing. It was like nothing had ever happened. They told me I could get off the blood thinners and that all I had to do was take one low-dose aspirin. One aspirin a day, that's it. And so every morning I take one low-dose aspirin. I have done this every morning for nearly 9 years. I will do it for the rest of my life. This little aspirin, it's small, it's insignificant. It's my mustard seed. It is that incredibly small thing which can lead to extraordinary things if I trust enough to let it. And it has changed, and it is changing my life. Because every morning I hold this mustard seed and I remember that this day is a gift that I didn't think I was going to have, and I get to treat it as a gift. And every morning I hold this mustard seed and I look at it and I try to remember that I don't need to be afraid. Not because nothing scary is going to happen to me, but because something scary actually really might happen to me. Only it's nothing to be afraid of, because I've been at the foot of the cross. And when I got there, I was not alone. Christ was there, and what Christ showed me at that moment that I would not trade for anything, is that no matter what, we have God, God has us, and we have each other. And because of that, there is nothing that together we cannot face. Because of that, we never, ever need to fear. Because of that, together, we can embrace each day with joy for the gift that it is. And that conviction has become my driving force. That conviction, that's why I came to All Saints Church. It's why I'm standing in front of you this morning. Now, today we launch our 2020 giving campaign, and so I'm supposed to be up here talking about giving. And I know that we're all coming from lots of different places when it comes to giving. I know that we have gotten so many different messages about wealth and giving throughout our life, and I know that we are coming from many different financial situations, from wealth to debt, and I also know that when we think about money, a primary emotion many of us feel is fear. So yes, I hope you will give and give generously to All Saints Church, because your giving is crucial. Because right now we are building an exciting foundation for the future of this congregation, and we're doing it like all of us are. We're doing it while we're facing rising costs just to keep doing what we're doing. And there's so much more. There is so much more about giving that is about being freed from fear and being freed to love. There is so much more about giving that is about what my mustard seed has been teaching me with every passing day. And that's what I want to talk about today. You see, we are being lied to. We're being lied to every day. We are being sold lies of fear and hopelessness. We are told whom to fear and what to fear. We are told that we have got to hold on so tight to what we have because of fear. We are told that we should not love out of fear of being hurt, that we should not trust for fear of being betrayed, that we should not try to be extraordinary because we might fail. We are told that we cannot make a difference, so why even try? And these lies of fear and hopelessness, they're killing us. They may not be physically taking away our lives, but they are surely taking away the love, the hope, the joy that is the reason for living. And every day I look at the mustard seed in my hand and I remember, if even for a moment, that those are lies, that this day, this year, this life can be extraordinary. That I don't need to be bound by fear, that I can embrace life with joy, that no matter what happens, even if the worst comes down, and I guess since nobody gets out of this life alive, I should probably say that even when the worst comes down, but when that happens, we're going to be holding each other's hands because we have God, and God has us, and we've got each other. And so every day I look at this mustard seed in my hand and I remember, even for a moment, that the antidote to the lies is love. The antidote to the lies is trust. The antidote to the lies is trusting that love is greater than fear. And that is what we are about here at All Saints Church. We are about the truth that love is greater than fear. Jesus says, if you had faith, if you had trust the size of a mustard seed, you could say to this mulberry tree, uproot yourself and plant yourself in the sea, and it would obey you. We are capable of extraordinary things. We know it. We've seen it. We feel it deep in our bones, and we want desperately to trust it. We want desperately not to believe the lies of fear and hopelessness, to trust that our life is about more than just the daily plodding from one day to the next, that there is deeper meaning and purpose, that we can make a difference that makes a difference. Walt Whitman sings that the answer to the meaning of a life so full of confusion and misery is that you are here, that life exists and identity, that the powerful play goes on and you may contribute a verse. That is true. That is the life that we can have. Mary Oliver ponders the fragility of life on a summer day and sings, "Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" That is true. That's the question. Together, we can do something extraordinary. We can be a part of something extraordinary. Together, we can make our lives extraordinary. Days roll by, and it seems like there's always going to be enough of them. until there's not. And then we realize as one we love is taking their final breaths, or as that we take our final breaths, that we would trade all we have for just one more ordinary, extraordinary day together. When my first child, Schrader, was born, an older friend said to me of parenthood, "You know, the days are long, but the years are short." That's true of life. The days turn into weeks, turn into years, turn into a lifetime, and we cheat ourselves every day when we let them speed by. We cheat ourselves when we don't look at what our deepest desire for love looks like, and it doesn't have to be that way. We can have the love we desire, and that love can be the joy of our hearts and the joy of our lives. I don't have a problem with talking to you about giving money at All Saints Church, because while money is really important, it's also sign and symbol of what I really want to ask you to give, and that's your lives, because that's where the joy is. Give our lives, give our whole selves for love. Don't hold back in fear. Together we can do what God has got us, and we have got each other. I want us to move our money from fear to love, because I want us to move our lives from fear to love. Life is too short and too beautiful for us to be prisoners of fear. Love calls us through lives of joy and sorrow, and yet even the sorrow can be a window to joy when we walk through lives together. This is the life we can have, and the moment is now. We don't have a moment to lose, because you see, we are always running out of time. And while that should not tempt us to fear, it should move us to urgency. There is no time for us to hold on to what we have in fear, because what makes our lives extraordinary is when we let go of what we fear to lose and instead open our arms wide to hold on to each other in love. I want you to give your money and your life to this community of love over fear at All Saints Church, because we need each other deeply, not just to get through the world we are in, but to change the world we are in. Because giving is where the joy is, and life should be about joy, don't you think? Because the powerful play is going on, and together we will contribute a verse. Because we do have just one wild and precious life. And I'm here to tell you that none of us is guaranteed one more day. And together we can spend each day of that wild and precious life in extraordinary ways if we break free of fear and give ourselves to love. That is why we are All Saints Church. Because together we are the mustard seed that reminds us that each day is a gift that none of us might have had, and that we get to treat it as a gift. Because together we are the mustard seed that reminds us that we do not need to be afraid, that this day, this year, this life can be extraordinary, that we can free our lives from fear and move our lives towards love, that no matter what happens, in the end, we are always holding each other's hands, because we have God. God has most definitely got us, and we most definitely have each other. Amen.